Writing reflective journals is a really common practice in teacher education. It's considered a way for teachers, aspiring teachers, to think deeply about what they see in schools and to think critically. And so I would say most teacher education programs do that, but often we're disappointed by what we see, not always, but students just writing, a retell. And then we went to the gym, and then we did math, and no real discussion of the big ideas and the themes. And I was part of a faculty learning community on assessment the year before I did my study, and was really influenced by the importance of formative assessment, how formative assessment is one of the most powerful ways that we can influence student learning, both K-12 and in a post-secondary context. So I thought maybe there's some role for me as an instructor to offer formative assessment in those student journals, that would actually help to deepen the quality of their reflection. So that's where the question came from. So I guess the project really had two phases. When I was part of the SoTL group the year before, when we were building our study, I considered it sort of a pilot and was really looking at what is deep reflection. What do we mean when we say we want students to think more deeply? In fact, I did a presentation at one point called "What does she mean by reflect deeply?" because I think that's what the students always were wondering. And so my project that semester was really to look at what do I really mean by reflect deeply, and built that largely on big solo taxonomy about the levels of thinking. And there's a group of scholars in Australia, John Bain and his colleagues, who adapted big solo taxonomy for teacher education reflection journals. And so when I looked at what do we mean by level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm not really picky about the levels as much as shallow and deep reflection. Shallow reflection really means, as I said, a lot of retell or a superficial conclusion about why one saw what happened in the schools. Deep reflection means things like asking questions, looking for the big idea, posing alternative explanations, looking for connections to theory. And so when I got clear that that's what I meant by deep reflection, then I think I was better able to articulate that to the students. So that was phase 1 of the project, was really defining what is deep reflection. And then phase 2, the second year, looked more at what difference did it make when I actually asked those prompting questions to the students. And so the journals, I should maybe point this out, are written in Google Docs, and they also had a critical friend. So the students would write their couple of paragraphs about what happened in school, often a retell and then a reflect, what's important about this. And then their critical friend and I would write a response to them, and then they responded to us. So that's why we called it a dialogue journal. But the interesting thing about the study, I think, was the surprise, because I expected that it was going to be my formative assessment that was really going to help them go deeply. And in some cases it did, but in many cases it wasn't me. It was really the end of the semester synthesis that they wrote. So the students were required at the end of the semester to look back on all their journal entries from the semester and pull out what were the ideas that kept coming up again and again, what was salient to you, and how did your thinking change about those topics. And that's actually where I saw the depth of thinking happening. And that actually squares with some of the research by Bain and his colleagues as well, that it wasn't so much the conversations with somebody as it was the big idea, the synthesis process that they did at the end of the semester. I think as faculty, we always say we want students to engage in critical thinking and deep reflection about their school experiences, but we're not always explicit about what we mean when we say that to students. And so one of the things I've done as a product of the research is developed what's called a framework for reflective thinking. And one part of it is simply a cut and paste from Bain's levels, but then there are some journal entries. Here's a level 1, and then a bit of a discussion. Why is this coded as level 1? And so there are exemplars, so the students can aspire to. They see the kind of tone of writing that we're looking for as it goes deeper. And that's posted in everybody's Blackboard sites, or any courses that have Blackboard. Any of the courses that have a journal component, the faculty refer the students to that, so it provides a resource. So I would say that's one of the sort of lasting impacts on student learning. The students that I researched are now in year 4, and I think that about to graduate, I think the kind of reflection they do in their own journal writing in years 1 and 2 is quite different from the journal writing they're doing in years 3 and 4. Because in those first 2 years, they're observing teachers and sometimes observing themselves, in that they're looking at the way they interact with children in the schools, but it's much different when they're the teacher in charge in their practica and they actually have to reflect on a lesson that went badly. That requires a fair bit of transparency and willingness to look inside and recognize where they messed up and recognize what surprised them. And so I hope that the kind of deep thinking they were doing when they were observing helped to set them up for the kind of reflection they were doing when they were looking at their own teaching. I think what faculty members need to do is wonder about their own students' learning. The advice we give to our teacher candidates in schools is at the end of a lesson, when you finish that lesson, what did you learn from the students' responses? What did you learn about their thinking? What did you learn about their misunderstandings? And I think as faculty members, we often have those kind of wondering experiences too. We've assigned a project or assigned some kind of task, and what the students submit isn't quite what we expected, or we recognize that they had some misunderstanding that we hadn't anticipated. And so our role as teachers is to go back and say, what could I have done differently? What would have helped the students to understand better, to have completed that project more effectively, to have met the goals of the course more effectively? And when we wonder about those things, that's us being reflective teaching. Being reflective teachers and engaging in reflective teaching. And I think that that's what SoTL's all about, is recognizing things that we could do differently that would actually improve student learning. And I think regardless of the discipline, faculty members wonder about their student learning. Why didn't they get that?